Right then. If we're all okay, we will begin. Good morning, dear folks. And we're nearly in February already. Well, what can I say? Mumble, rumble, and things like that. But I'm glad to see a number of people here today. And we will be having a talk from our friend Jeffrey Smith. Barney Smith. Jeffrey Smith's in Kent somewhere now. Right. Let me stop rambling and say a talk from Barney with the title of What Made Me Decide to Become a Quaker? Barney.
Yes, you'll think I'm cheating a bit because I have to admit that my parents were Quakers. But that isn't good enough reason for being a Quaker in itself. So it is a legitimate title for me to talk to. There was a time when children of Quakers were automatically counted as members of the Society of Friends, and the various different arrangements were made in the 1960s of temporary membership for children, and I was blessed with temporary membership as a child. And when they abolished temporary membership, because it's one of those compromises which annoyed everybody. It annoyed those people who thought that you ought
Somebody's
to be
cracking paper. Is that?
Sorry.
Oh, it's you. Okay, fair enough. It's close to the microphone.
And it annoyed those people who didn't think that children should be joined, too much like infant baptism, and that the decision should be entirely made by, it should entirely be an adult choice, even if though people were allowed to join of their own volition of any age, that it should be of their own volition. So temporary membership was abandoned, and I was asked, well, what should we do with you? And I said, oh, put me down as an attender. I'm much too young to make decisions like that. So I entered my teenage as an attender of a Quaker meeting and a boarder at a Quaker boarding school. The Quaker meeting Sunday school was okay. They got us, did Bible stories and sang a hymn, and we drew pictures of things. I can still remember drawing a picture of Elijah building a bonfire or something. But yes, so we had I think they were called Sunday schools then, and were fairly conventional. And so we had a sort of Christian, a bit of a Christian education in a Quaker community. Boarding school, Quaker boarding school was a school. And that sort of dominated the ethos of the place. So we had compulsory meeting for worship on Sundays, and compulsory meeting for worship is a sort of what's the word, contradiction. You can't make people worship, and so each term I'd be put off Quakerism because of compulsory meeting for worship. And also say it's a school, it's a hierarchical organization. The teachers were the upper class, the pupils were the secondary class, and the domestic staff hardly had names. This was the late 50s, early 60s. So it's not really a Quaker community at all. But what I did have as an antidote to that was the annual monthly meeting Quaker camp. And that was mostly adults who didn't have their own children and children who didn't bring their parents. But it was nevertheless a community. We were on first name terms with the adults and joking terms with the adults. It was, and the young adults, as they grew into 17, 18, 19-year-olds, started taking responsibilities for the running of the camp. And that was a good experience of Quaker community and introduced me to one of, I think, the pivotal theological concepts of Quakerism, which isn't much talked about explicitly these days, but I'll share it to you. And that's the concept of notions. That you can believe what you like, really, but some so-called beliefs can be classified as notions in that there's no experiential evidence for them, neither yours nor anybody else's. Take things like life after death. You can have ideas about life after death, but you have to take them with a pinch of salt because there's nobody who can actually report on it. There's near-death experiences, which are quite exciting, but life after death itself would be described by Quakers as notions. And Quakers have had notions over the years, plenty of them, but they've taken them not too seriously. They've not become creedal, they've not become fixed. And what they've insisted on, the most important things are experiential, or as early Quakers call them, experimental, things that you actually could experience or believe that other people have experienced, because we're not on our own here. We can tap into the experience of other people, but we should tap into the experience of other people, whether it's individually or in books or wherever. We can tap into their experience, but we can take their notions with a pinch of salt. And that, I think, is a fundamental understanding of theology of Quakers, which is sort of taken as read these days rather than spelt out. But in one of the evening discussion groups, one of the older Quakers there introduced this idea to us. And I thought, yeah, I can go with that, because I was struggling with ideas of Jesus being God and divinity and these various theoretical theological things in the Christian tradition. And this gave me a tool to discriminate between the things which were serious and needed to be believed in and understood, and the things which were speculative and I could put to one side comfortably. So thank you, monthly meeting Quaker camp. They're now called area meeting Quaker camps, and not every area is privileged to have them, but Bristol is. And Marion Liebman was one of the people who's helped start the Bristol tradition, which is still going strong. I then got a bit older and started joining in young friends groups. There was a Bedfordshire general meeting. I'm using the old terminology here, young friends group. And we also did things in Jordan's monthly meeting, young friends. This was while I was a sixth former, and we'd go off for weekends, sleep on floors, do a certain amount of folk dancing, do some work parties, did quite a lot of gardening and painting things over weekends. And also, particularly in the Bedfordshire General Meeting Young Friends, conduct business in a Quakerly manner with our own clerk and organise ourselves. It was fairly autonomous. And then I went up to Liverpool and found there was a Liverpool Young Friends in the meeting house. But that didn't last so long, as Helen Griffith there knows, because the council possessed the meeting house and evicted the Quakers from it. And so suddenly Young Friends no longer had the room they had in this meeting house, a room of their own. And the Young Friends group sort of disappeared. And one weekend I went back to join the Bedfordshire General Meeting Young Friends and was bemoaning this over the meal table. And one of the older young friends there, I owe him a debt of gratitude, listened to me and said, "And what are you going to do about it?" And that's one of the most significant points in about why I became a Quaker, because it's what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to moan. The implication was I have to think about what I do about it? So I went back to Liverpool and offered to be the clerk of Young Friends. And quite how we did it, I can't even remember now. This is about 1967. And the group managed to get together and do things together somewhere. I don't know now where, because we had no meeting house. The meeting for worship was happening in the crypt of the Anglican cathedral, but we had no space there of our own, at least not for about 18 months. And then Liverpool Quakers started to convert a large Victorian semi-detached house into being their Quaker meeting house. And Young Friends acquired a room on the second floor, an attic room, and 3 Young Friends were housed in bedsitters on the first floor. So we were sort of resident friends, not caretakers. But yes, the Liverpool Young Friends group took off. At one point, we actually had 2 meetings a week. But that was a bit like one serious evening and one games evening was. But so there I was. It had provided me with an opportunity for service, a community, a family to belong to in a strange city. And that didn't quite tip me over into being a Quaker, but almost. 2 things I think sealed it, neither of which is particularly high-minded or worthy, but one was sitting, the most high-minded one was sitting in meeting listening to a blackbird singing. I think blackbirds sing absolutely beautifully, just right for our ears. But of course, they're not doing it for us. They're doing it for themselves. And this understanding that it was really not the blackbird doing something for me, but it was me. I had to do something in response to the blackbird, and that is appreciate it. And I think this was a necessary understanding for me, being still pretty egocentric, that the world doesn't revolve around me. I've got to play my part in the world and be a useful part of it in wherever opportunity arises. So that's the nearest I have, I think, to what I'd call a spiritual experience, because I think I'm pretty spiritually inert, really. Not really good material for a religious person at all. Very rational, task-orientated. But that's one of the nearest. And the other one was quite funny, really. While we were worshipping in the crypt, the subject came up as to whether we should move from the Anglican cathedral to a rather dismal Victorian house in the suburbs. And quite a lot of the meeting really rather enjoyed turning up at the Anglican cathedral for meeting for worship. We even had a Quaker wedding there on one occasion. So we had a local meeting discussion as to what we should do. And I stood up to express what it would be for Young Friends, that it would provide us with a room which we could use for ourselves, that the bed sits on the first floor could be used by Young Friends, who would provide a Quaker presence in the building when it wasn't being used by friends. And I think there's one other reason I was going to give, I've forgotten now. And somebody stood up and said, Barney Smith is not a member of this meeting and he's not entitled to speak. That wouldn't happen now, but it happened then. And I don't think she's the only one in the room who felt a bit affronted by this non-member young person putting his oar in. But what happened then was another young friend who was a member got up and said, I think these are the points which Barney was going to make, and made them very clearly. Anyway, the decision was taken to move to that building, and And that made me think, am I a member or not? And I just really decided, yes, I was a member. I had to make sure that I ticked all the buttons. And I think for me, there are 3 buttons to tick for being a member. One is that you are in some way wanting to have a spiritual religious life, that you're not quite content with a rational, completely secular understanding of life, or else why would you want to belong to a religious society? I've always teetered on the edge of that, but I thought that yes, I could sign up to being a religious person and wanting a spiritual life. The other things were sympathy with Quaker values. I think that's essential. And the third is wanting to play one's part in the Quaker community, to actually contribute in whatever way is appropriate to you, your abilities, your means. And anyway, I did apply. It's interestingly, I was accepted into membership. One person in the area meeting, I wasn't there, but I had spies in the monthly meeting, as it was then. I had spies that somebody said that in spite of the fact that I didn't adhere to the Quaker testimony on alcohol, they thought I should be admitted into membership. I don't think we think now there is a Quaker testimony on alcohol, and I think probably most of the people in that room thought that the Quaker testimony to alcohol was one of moderation rather than abstinence, and I'm very happy to own up to moderation, but for him it was abstinence, and it was known that I wasn't abstinent. So anyway, there, aged about 21, that's my journey to becoming a Quaker. And I'm happy to take questions or just hear other people's experiences. As quite often when people hear a story like that, they want to say, oh, that sort of thing happened to me, and relate it. And I think that's fine. But I'm happy to take questions as well to expand on any of that.
I remember once attending yearly meeting, and someone stood up on the stage in front to give notices, and he said, and we will also have a group, the group for alcohol and drugs. And everybody went, well, I think you must have got that quite a little bit wrong. Which I always remember with amusement. Sorry, Hattie?
Yeah, hi. I'm not a member. But Barney, it's very interesting that you distilled 3 buttons to tick. And I like those 3 buttons to tick. And certainly number 2, the values, and number 3, wanting to be part of the Quaker community, are very strong for me. They're wanting a spiritual part of life. As you say about yourself, you're a very practical, pragmatic person, and so am I. But I don't see why that doesn't allow space for a spiritual element, and certainly humanity. Now, whether spirituality and humanity are the same, as I suppose that's out for question, but I'm sure a lot of people don't think so. But I've been thinking in the last few weeks about becoming a member. Thank you.
Kingsley?
Thanks, Barney. I found that really fascinating. I love the idea of the notions. I'd never come across that before. That was really helpful. And the 3 buttons as well, because sometimes I've thought, oh, golly, I feel a very naughty Quaker. I don't think I fit the bill. And so having your 3 definitions was something that really clarified the reasons why we're here, really. So thank you. That was very edifying, really interesting.
Helen?
I remember hearing a story, which I believe is a true one, of some person in some meeting somewhere applying for membership, but admitting he was an atheist. And he had the usual visit and discussion. And they said, he was asked, well, given that you're an atheist, why do you want to become a member of the Society of Friends? And he said, because I want to be part of this community. So, you know, whatever his ability to go halfway on a tick of wanting a spiritual life or not, I guess there was something about his participation and his real impulse to do that and to give to the community was seen by those friends to be sufficient. But yes, I think it's a nice 3-point plan or 3-point not mnemonic. What do you call it? Well, a little thing to remember. Sorry, I'm not getting the right word today.
Patsy?
Yeah, I don't know how to click the little button that puts your hand up properly, so sorry about that. Yes, I was thinking about the 3 points, and I think I came in sort of upside down. I think I had been looking for. I kind of had a feeling of spiritual anxiety. I was looking for the right place where I could connect, and I'd been trying for a long time before I came into a Quaker meeting, but it was quite soon after that, really, that I had this extraordinary experience when it was during a meeting, so a silent meeting, of course, and it was during the pandemic, so we were at home and we were all connecting online. And so I was sitting looking out of the window, but in front of my laptop, and I just had this extraordinary experience. You really have, really, I don't have the words to describe it properly, but it was a feeling of peace, but also terrific security and belonging. And it wasn't it, although it included the meeting, it seemed to me to come from outside our boundaries altogether. And that has stayed with me whenever I'm in distress or worried, or I think, this, that, or the other, what shall I do? I can recall that moment, and it enables me to try to fulfill the other 2 steps, which, of course, came to learn were part of being a Quaker. So sort of signing up, so to speak, to always speak the truth and to examine myself carefully each day, to make a study of our beliefs, and to try to take a part in our community. But for me, really, my certainty came, as I say, sort of the other way around. I had that spiritual feeling first. I don't know, if most people have it one way or another, or maybe it permeates gradually. I don't know.
I think what Patsy has described comes under a category of things which, in a Swarthmore lecture by Ralph Hetherington, were given the label peak experiences, and they do vary, but they do have certain things in common. And usually it's the sense of belonging and the sense of oneness with the whole of creation, things like that. And the other thing is the lasting quality of them, and very few people ever have two in their life. But they're not something which, there's something which a large proportion of the population have, apparently. I've forgotten the percentages, but it's less than half, but probably more than a quarter. But of course, how people describe them and to what they attribute them depends on their cultural background and the language available to them. The experiences are real, but the explanations can vary enormously. But they do have something to do with goodness and belonging, and yes, so it's not surprising they fit in with our Christian Quaker tradition.
Sorry.
May I speak? Okay.
Do.
Firstly, Barney, thank you so much. I found that really intriguing and very helpful. And I just wanted to recount a little incident that happened when I was considering applying for membership. And I'd already been attending Quakers in different countries for nearly 20 years. And when I approached a lady at the Brixton meeting we were attending, she was a rather dour, very nice Scottish lady, but she said, well, you must understand what you're taking on. This is a very big responsibility and a lot of work will be put on your shoulders, and you have to be prepared to shoulder that. And I think it could have been quite a daunting response to many people. Maybe you could discover that afterwards, but I did sort of develop a sense that such a high standard was placed on becoming a member that it could be a little off-putting sometimes to people. And I feel that we should be, and I think in Bristol we should be encouraging people to become members, because as members you get a much greater sense of what the real community is about. And I think it encourages that desire to do more and to then take on more responsibilities. So that I'm just throwing that out there. It is an issue I've spoken about before. Thank you.
When I was a young lad, I had quite a large family, and my father and especially my mother as well were avowed Marxists who believed that as Marx said, religion is the opium of the people and all that lot to it. So I grew up in that whole area of the people making the decision and all this type of stuff. But then I left home and became a hippie. And so that kind of the whole idea, I lived in community. I lived in with a number of people in a number of squats. And we were very much part of a community together. We very much believed in what we used to say at those times, the vibes, man, which was the thing within us, the thing which makes us a community together, which we support each other and are there for each other, but on a greater level than just mates living together type of thing, and then after that, discovering Quakers was again a seminal moment, of going into I walked past West Ham meeting quite often, and actually going in there and actually speaking to people. First of all, a little old lady who couldn't have been more than 5'3", and presenting me with a leaflet, and afterwards a cup of tea and a biscuit, and looked at me and said, "You look very colourful, dear." and becoming feeling very much part of that, very much part of this is again my community. This is again the spirituality which I discovered with my mates in the hippie community. This was kind of a distillation of that. And I've been around and been a member for a goodly number of years, but I've been part of a Quaker meeting for 50 years now, so it must do something for me. Although there have been times when I think, nope, this is it, I'm going, leaving, because of some possible doctrinal thing which I firmly disagreed with. And one little bit before I stop speaking, because as friends know, I can ramble on for interminable. But when I told my brother that I was a Quaker, and he roared with laughter and said, "What would Dad think of that?" Because my father died when I was 18, so I couldn't actually debate this with him. And I had many a debate with my brother, about Quakerism and all this type of thing, So that's me.
I could say something.
Do, David, do.
Barney, I really appreciate the way that you have framed your approach to Quakers and your what to me is wonderful rational inquiry. Such great respect for people who really consider their lives and what they do. And I think your point about Maslow was the guy who identified people having peak experiences. About 40% of people have something where you say, have you got something in your life that you would identify as a peak experience? About 40% of people have got something like that to come up with. And then the point is, from that peak experience, that becomes a sort of, talisman is not the right word. It's a pointer for people to make changes in their lives to try and bring that in permanently to the point where they are, in Maslow's language, self-actualized. And I'd actually managed to, by the time my parents were lovely evangelicals, and my grandfather, who was just the loveliest of men, was a Methodist lay preacher, and he used to cycle around the Kent countryside of a Sunday, being a lay preacher. And I was influenced by growing up in that family and by my grandfather greatly. But I would say by the time I had been through university and come across politics, come across social reality, I grew up in a very conservative, complacent part of the country, Kent, and learned about social challenges and what was going on in the country by going to university in Nottingham. And I'd say by the time I was living and working in Newcastle, I had escaped much of my Christian conditioning, much of my evangelical Christian conditioning, and I would call it conditioning, because that's what I sort of picked up with and absorbed as a child growing up, rather than took it on board in the same conscious way that I see you describing your experiences, Barney. And then there came a time when I learned transcendental meditation, and some weeks or months into that, I had this thought: how does this go with my practice as a Christian? And then I thought, what are you talking about? You haven't thought about yourself as a Christian for years, and I hadn't. And so I realized I'd come across a sort of a community where people were learning a practice that was being put across as a simple, natural mental technique, but which had spiritual implications. And I realized that Maharishi was reviving an Indian wisdom system. And I see my experience since then as being a fellow traveler with people who believe in community, with people who are into peak experience, who are into adopting that consciously in their lives and seeing what it has for them in their community. And I for a while, for 3 years, I was living in a meditation community in the United States, and that was very formative, being in a group with 3,000 people practicing meditation twice a day, not being with a group of, if you're lucky, 19 people practicing Quaker meeting once a week. And that was very intense and powerful and formative, and at the moment remains my sort of defining experience, the one that I refer everything back to. But I love it that there is the opportunity in the Quaker community to have this kind of discourse, and that it's valued, and that people are not beholden to any particular set of notions, you would say, or dogmas, but free to move within a community, carrying their own exploration with them rather than fixed set of ideas. And I think that's more than enough. But thank you for creating this opportunity, Barney. I really appreciate it. And it's lovely to hear what everybody else has to say. It's great.
I've got a naughty little notion of my own, and that is that peak experiences have something to do with being tired and hungry. My examples I give of this are Paul on the road to Damascus, George Fox climbing over Pendle Hill, and if you've read his accounts of his life, Ben Pink Dandelion on a Greyhound bus traveling across America. But I think that although you've got 3 examples there, I don't think they're the general rule. But it's interesting how almost every religious tradition has fasting built into it, one way or another, except for Quakers.
I can't help responding to that, Barney. I studied with a wonderful Western mystic called Thomas Hübl, a German, who is a wonderful teacher in the area of dealing with trauma. I once went for a weekend to Berlin where he was talking about the Holocaust with 3 generations of Germans and Jews, and somebody prepared to hold that dialogue is obviously quite an impressive person. And I went to Nepal with him and a group for 18 days, and we were 8,000 feet up in the mountains. In and our cook was a Buddhist, was a monk in a hotel that specialized in handling wedding receptions for people coming up from Kathmandu. People would come up for the whole weekend. And so we were told it was going to be, it was going to be very austere. But actually, for 3 weeks, I was having Indian wedding feasts, morning, noon, and night. And it's the best fed I've ever been in my life. But at 8,000 feet up in the Himalayas, I was also having peak experiences. So I just want to say, peak experiences do not require austerity or fasting. It can be the most wonderful of conditions. And this was with a great teacher and a lovely group of, if you like, seekers with this person in just the most wonderful spiritual atmosphere high up in the Himalayas. And so the conditions can be created anywhere. Hattie, you're shaking your head.
That's just amazing. Yeah. Yeah. But I also think this fasting or pushing yourself, I don't think it has to be fasting, but I mean, I like the feeling after doing some very hard exercise, and I throw myself into my 1 hour in the gym.
Yeah.
And love the feeling afterwards. Or, I used to dance like crazy of a night in some kind of club and really moving and exhausting myself. I love that feeling, and I know fasting is hard, actually, very, very hard. And look at the people who are doing hunger strikes at the moment, going into 50, 60 days. Gosh. Enough said. Just at extremes. And I think people lived in more hardship than we do these days.
My rational mind starts thinking of the release of hormones. I remember doing cross-country runs and hating it. And then I realized that if I actually tried hard and ran round as fast as I could, I got a wonderful feeling shortly afterwards, but by about the time I'd got into a shower. And I gather is it the release of dopamine? But I can't remember which it is. But yes, our hormones are clever things and sometimes are confused with spirituality. Just like the other very familiar to Quakers behavior of, what's the fight or flee hormone?
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline.
Yes. One of the circumstances which the body can produce adrenaline is when you're getting very excited about an idea in your head, some realization, and you're thinking about whether you ought to share it with anybody or anything, and you're sitting still with a group of Quakers in a meeting for worship. The release of adrenaline when you're still produces either shaking or the perception of shaking. And yes, people quite often consider that to be a spiritual input, but yes, it's a bit of our body chemistry, which can be useful.
Hi. Yes, do carry on, Fred.
Yeah, it's Graham here. I guess my journey was that I did have an intense spiritual experience when I was working alone on a Sunday when I must have been about 20. And then I went up to Warwick and took on my first real professional job, at the end of the day, I used to feel really stressed out. So I used to meditate. And what I found in meditation was that when the body and the mind was quietened down, there was something else, which was just a kind of reminder. And where we were living there in Leamington Spa, it used to have these body, mind, spirit fairs, which included leaflets on tables. And I took one which was written by a French Catholic Quaker called God is Silence. And I read this and thought, oh, that's pretty intriguing. I've never met a Quaker before. So I went to the Quaker meeting house in Warwick. And within about 2 minutes after the meeting had started, I felt incredibly comfortable and like I'd come home and this was the right place for me. And that was the sort of story about how I went into meeting. But for 14 years, I was an attender. And it was Groucho Marx that really brought me into becoming a member, which was the wonderful quote of him that he didn't want to be member of a club that would have him as a member. And I realized that it was that kind of, not quite sure if Quakers, if I'm good enough for Quakers, was the holding up of me actually asking to become a member. A couple of other things is that the discussion I had with, well, Aubrey Warren, who was a writer and a Catholic, was a horrible man with a bad temper and all the rest. And people pointed out to him, how can you be such a grumpy individual and be such a strong Catholic? And he pointed out that if he wasn't a Catholic, he would probably be even worse. So I take the same view about being a Quaker, that I might not be the best Quaker in the world, but I'd certainly be a lot worse off without it. Over.
Marion.
Sorry, I had to miss chunks of this very interesting meeting because a phone call with my daughter. So I'll have to catch up with the recording. So when I joined, I used to joke and say I joined to lower the tone a bit. Hattie's not hearing me. I said I joined to lower the tone because everybody seemed so august and sort of worthy.
Learn a
Lower the tone.
Oh, right. Thank you.
I was I sort of my background was sort of Jewish agnostic parents who had no attachment to any religion whatsoever. I got swept up into Anglicanism partly through education and going to Church of England school, and I got confirmed in the Church of England. And then when I was just around about sort of 18, it all kind of left me. I just thought, I don't believe in any of this stuff. And I got swept up into the evangelicals when I was at university. That was a very damaging experience. And then at Oxford, there was a kind of a refugee community that fetched up at the Quakers. And I say refugee, I mean refugees from all other kind of religions. And so I sort of came into contact with Quakers just because I kind of knew several of them. And then my best friend at college, she became a Quaker, and I used to go and visit her. And then my cousin Eva Pinthas, that some people will have known or known about, I discovered that she was a Quaker. And people think that I came to Quakers through her or because of her, but actually it was the other way around. I decided that she must be worth getting to know because she was a Quaker. I'd previously heard that through the family that she was a very I'm not finding the words, a kind of a sort of very fierce. I thought she must be a sort of fierce evangelical or something. Anyway, when I knew that she was a Quaker, I thought, oh, she must be worth getting to know. So, she lent me books and so forth. And then I met Mike through a discussion group in Bristol. So when I came to Bristol, I knew one person, and he went to Redland meeting. I don't know if people remember him, Arthur Peacock. And I thought, well, I can either say to Arthur, well, I'm happy to see you, but I want none of your Quaker rubbish, or I can gradually get drawn in, or I can just arrive and look like I've always been going to Quaker meeting, and then nobody will ask me any questions. So, so I did the latter, but I thought if they try any evangelical nonsense on me, then they're toast. But they didn't. So, so I'd been going for about sort of must have been about 5 years in Redland, and then I met Mike, and he was already he joined Quakers went in his previous place in Jordan's, I think, and then we were going to get married, and I was changing my job, and I kind of thought, and I hate making decisions, and a lot of people will know that. And so I thought, oh, well, perhaps one more decision, might as well do it. And I had this rather crazy idea that if I joined after I got married to Mike, people would think it was just because of Mike. And I wanted to do it kind of independently. I realized later, of course, they wouldn't. Nobody would actually think that, but that's what I thought at the time. And so I thought, well, I better join now then. And I was very uncertain because I thought, I don't think I measure up to the highest standards. I don't think I'm a pacifist because with my parents having been refugees from Nazi Germany, I don't think they could see any way of sort of doing anything positive without going to war with Hitler. And I came across a definition of pacifism, which was to take away the occasion of all wars. And I thought, well, I could go with that. I might not be able to lay down weapons or say never go to war, but if I could work hard to take away the occasion of war, that would be something I could resonate with, and is something that I think I've spent a fair amount of time actually doing or trying to do. So and I, like somebody else said, there have been times when I kind of thought, no, I'm leaving, and there've been times when I haven't gone to meeting for several months because of one thing or another. But it's like a family, you may not like them all, you may not get on with them all, but they are a kind of a family. Well, they're, I suppose, the only kind of family that I really have. I do have a daughter and some grandchildren, but they're a long way away, and there's no network of far-flung relations because of what happened in the Holocaust. All those people that still existed. Again, I might not have liked them, but they all died. So Quakers have been my family, and I do find it quite difficult at the moment with that background, with the to my mind, a total preoccupation with Gaza, horrible though it is. It just seems like, for an organization with which says it has no creeds, if you say anything against the kind of Palestinian agenda, then it's like I kind of feel like an out person. So that's quite uncomfortable for me. But then again, it's the family thing. So I'm still kind of very engaged. Nationally, perhaps less sort of dedicated than I have been in the past. But it's a strange thing, really. And sometimes I think I'm a totally unspiritual person, and sometimes I think I'm grappling with it. But the kind of the values and the community are probably what kind of keep me there. So that's plenty from me. Oh, one more thing. When I was joint clerk with Hemi, and there was the usual dearth of people to fill posts, we decided to have a little survey about why
why people didn't become members, because a lot of these post people were supposed to be members. And that was very illuminating. And there were quite a few people who said, oh, I don't become a member because then I would have even more jobs to do and I don't have time. So that was, and some people said, I don't join because I don't believe in the idea of membership. If I come, that's enough. So, and I think probably they would say, and that's how the early Quakers were. They came. There wasn't such a thing as membership. That's the kind of bureaucratic requirement that was imposed later. And I think probably there are reasons, but lots of reasons. Anyway, it was interesting. And a few people said, oh, I didn't know you could become a member. How do I do that? Anyway,
Helen, you're muted, Helen. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Helen, bottom left of your screen, there's a little thing that says audio with a red line through it. Can you see that and click on it?
It
Bottom
depends
left
what
audio.
kind of machine she's on.
Well, or sorry, something that says audio.
Or mute.
Or mute, that you can unmute.
Can the host unmute?
It's not happened yet. Is Tony about?
Could the host person unmute Helen? That's often possible.
I'm trying to.
If Helen is on a laptop, you just press the space bar and hold it down.
Oh, try that, yes.
I can ask to unmute, which I've just...
Did you hear that, Helen? No space bar, hold it down.
Oh, that's Gillian. Sorry, I'm looking for...
Yeah, no, I'm repeating it. Sorry for Helen, because lots of people were talking. You could write in the chat, but that might take longer.
Do you know which one?
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Helen, you're there.
I've forgotten what I was going to say.
I
think I was going to say, I've always been a Quaker. My parents were Quakers. The thing that is the major thing for me is the meeting for worship. You can't get a meeting for worship anywhere else. And whenever I go to another sort of service, I think, where's the listening? So the Quaker, the meeting for worship is so central, but I've travelled all over the country during my life. I've been London, Oxford, Swansea, now Bristol, and wherever I've gone, there's been a Quaker meeting, and that's brilliant because it's this family thing. You go into a group that have got the same values, and that is so important. The other thing is, being a Quaker has given me lovely opportunities. I taught at Pramana High School for 2 years. Absolutely brilliant. The most wonderful experience. And then I was an EA, Marion, but I was taught and shown both sides of the difficulties. And I also knew Eva Pinthas when I was in Liverpool meetings. That was great.
Yeah.
I could go on about what Quakerism has meant to me. I've loved it. But I enjoyed knowing Eva a bit. Anyway, there you go. And also, for instance, Barney knew my parents. Well, because of my age now, but because I've moved around the country, it's important to me that there's a link there with my family and Liverpool meeting. And, it's good. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Because I'm that type of person, here's a little story. A mate of mine became an Anglican priest, and I went to his first service, and service continued. And within it, there was a little bit of silence. So I said to him at the end, I said, I'd like the service, David, but the silence, a bit quakely there. But he looked at me and said, he said, we don't do much of that, right? I said, what? He said, silence, dangerous stuff.
Funny you should say that, Ray. One thing I didn't mention, I forgot to mention, it was so obvious to me. My time in Nepal was 18 days in silence in the mountains. And we had a meditation room. And the idea is that there should always be somebody in the room meditating round the clock.
Now I can't hear anything.
You can't hear any of this, Helen.
Not sure what that is.
No, I can't.
Am I mute? Can you hear me? Can other
Yes.
people hear me? Okay, good.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear?
We're all on different connections, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, yes, it will.
Yes. I will also have to leave now. Sorry. Thank you so much, Barney. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But before many more people drift off, February, what we're starting on February the 6th, we have the speaker here. Kingsley is going to speak to us on Earth Core Gathering.
Great.
It's Earth Care Gathering. Earth Care Gathering.
Earth Care. My humble apologies, friend. Right. Well, thank you all, and especially thank you, Barney, for actually speaking on this. It was an enjoyable and in sometimes enlightening meeting. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barney.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.